All right, let's get right into it. We always talk about success being about talent or grinding harder than everyone else, or maybe just getting lucky. But what if one of the biggest factors is a skill we barely even think about? Today, we're going to unpack that hidden element, your ability to actually judge people's character.
So, what is that secret ingredient? It's not about being the smartest person in the room or pulling the most all nighters. It's about who you choose to let into that room with you. It really all comes down to who you trust. And that's our first big idea here, this hidden success factor. Look, success is almost never a solo mission. It's built on partnerships, on teams, on collaborations, but that entire structure is only as solid as the people holding it up. And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. When you trust the right people, doors just seem to open. You get support, you find opportunities. But when you trust the wrong people, whoa, that's a direct path to betrayal, major setbacks, and sometimes total failure. This one skill can literally be the difference between sinking or swimming. So just how high are the stakes we're talking about? Let's actually break down what this looks like in the real world across the most important parts of our lives. This is where it gets serious. Just take a look at this breakdown. The contrast it's just night and day, right? In business, the right partner brings growth. The wrong one can lead to fraud and financial ruin. In your career, a good mentor has your back, while a bad colleague might steal your work. And in your personal life, it's the difference between a stable, growing relationship and pure emotional chaos. The consequences are massive. And this right here, this is such a powerful way to think about it. You could have the most brilliant, world-changing idea, but if you tie your dream to a dishonest or unreliable person, the whole thing goes down. That one bad judgment call can sink the entire ship. Okay, so if this is so critical, why do we mess it up so often? Why do we keep trusting the wrong people? Well, it usually comes down to a few really common psychological traps that honestly are incredibly easy to fall into. Here they are, the big three. We let our feelings take the driver's seat. We just don't have the experience yet to spot the warning signs. Or we're just so desperate for an answer that we willingly ignore the red flags waving in our face. Let's dig into each of these.
First up, the emotional trap. You know the feeling, right? Someone comes along, they're super charismatic, they say all the right things, everything you've been dying to hear, and suddenly your critical thinking just goes on vacation. It feels good to trust them, so you do, and you never even bother to check if their actions line up with their pretty words.
And then there's the experience gap. Honestly, spotting untrustworthy behavior is a learned skill. It's all about pattern recognition. If you've never been exposed to certain kinds of manipulation before, it can be almost impossible to see it for what it is. You just don't have a frame of reference for it yet.
And finally, desperation. This one might be the most dangerous. When you are just desperate for that investment, for that promotion, for any kind of help, your judgment gets so cloudy. You start making excuses for bad behavior, you overlook obvious warning signs because you need this person to be the solution to your problems. All right, enough about the problems. Let's talk solutions. How do we get better at this? Let's pivot from the traps to a real, practical guide for figuring out who is actually worth our trust.
Now, before we get into a whole list of traits, I want to just pause on this one single word, integrity. And this definition, this is everything. It's not about how people act when they're in the spotlight. It's about who they are in the shadows. This is probably the single most powerful indicator of trustworthiness you will ever find.
So, what does that integrity actually look like in the real world? Well, it breaks down into a few key things you can watch for. Trustworthy people are consistent. Their values don't just change depending on who's in the room. They have accountability. They own their screw-ups instead of pointing fingers. They have that core integrity. And maybe most importantly, they have a proven track record. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? Stop listening to what people promise they're going to do. Look at what they have done. A person's history is the most honest resume you will ever read. It tells you the true story of their character. Now, let's be real for a second. Nobody gets this right 100% of the time. Not even close. The most successful people on the planet misplace their trust sometimes. The real difference maker isn't whether you make a mistake, it's what you do next. This is the absolute key. Getting burned is eventually going to happen. The real question is, does that fire forge you into something stronger, or does it just turn you to ash? It is all about your response. A successful person treats a betrayal like tuition. Yeah, it's a painful, expensive lesson, but it is a lesson. They go back, they figure out what red flags they missed, and they use that hard won knowledge to upgrade their judgment for the future. The failure becomes fuel.
But on the other side of the coin, you have this destructive loop. You get burned, you blame the other person entirely, you learn absolutely nothing about your own blind spots, and then you go out and make the exact same mistake with somebody new. This is how people get trapped in a cycle of defeat.
And that brings us right to the core message of all of this. Your skills, your knowledge, your hard work, they're all absolutely essential. But they can only get you so far if you're surrounded by people who are going to pull the rug out from under you. Who you trust is every bit as important as what you know. So I'll leave you with this to really think about. Considering everything we've just talked about, consistency, accountability, integrity, who in your life has genuinely earned your trust? And why? Because recognizing the good is just as critical as spotting the bad.